morning. It is good to see you all. Hope you guys are having a great week so far because, it's only been a few hours into the start of this week, but I love that you're here. It's a great way to start it. I am actually excited. This is going to be a good series going into this concept of when in doubt. What do you do as a believer when you go through seasons of doubt? You have times of doubt in your faith. And the truth is, it happens to all of us. We find seasons where we just wrestle with what we believe or why we believe it. What do we do when we are in these seasons? Before we jump into this, I have one quick announcement. Moving into the summer, so service times this summer, as we move into the summer, starting, June. First Sunday in June, we'll announce this for a number of weeks coming up, so it'll keep coming. We're going to do a 9 o'clock service here, 10 o'clock at East Fishers, and 11 o'clock here. So 9 and 11 at this location, and 10 o'clock over at East Fishers starting in June will be the service times. And so we'll keep announcing that just to make sure you stand. If you come to this service, you're in, you're doing the right thing, just keep coming. I'm excited about it. It's going to be really good. And the way we're building this is our teaching team, we're going to do some really creative stuff. Our teaching team is actually going to teach at all the two main locations every Sunday morning. So whether it's me or Marcus, we have a number of great things happen up, or Andy, John, West, and those guys will teach at all three of those locations each Sunday. There's so many cool things coming up. I cannot wait to share some of that with you. It'll come more in the weeks to come. But between here and East Fishers, these two campuses, it'll be 9 o'clock here, 10 o'clock there, and 11 o'clock back at this location, service times. Let's go ahead and pray and we'll jump in. Lord, I love you. Thank you for your grace and mercy. I pray that as we just begin to talk about this idea of doubt, when we are in seasons or times or even places in our faith where it doesn't make sense, we don't understand it, what do we do when we are in seasons of doubt? Let my words do nothing more than make you ever more famous and known. I love you, Jesus. Draw us to you. Prepare our hearts to taste and see how good you are. Let us understand faith in a new way. And Lord, maybe even be okay with the reality that you allow us to go through seasons where we wrestle in our faith. In your name, amen. I have had many times over the years, people come to me with a statement something like this. Pastor Mike, and even as I say this, I got to be careful because some of you in this room are going to go, he's talking about me. No, there's probably like 50 of you 20, 30 of you between the campuses that have had this conversation with me. So I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm talking about all of you collectively, right? Is that good? Is it gossip if it's everyone? I don't know. But I've had many times or emails, conversations that have gone something like this. Pastor Mike, I have a kid, they went to college, and while in college, a professor made them think that part of the Bible was just unreasonable, and now they've rejected Christianity. So it may be like a professor just got them to believe that a global flood is totally impossible, or got them to believe that, age of the earth, or dinosaurs, or whatever it might be, and they convinced them that this doesn't work, and they've just kind of rejected Christianity, and they've walked away. What do I do? Well, there are 3 statements I want to make today, and I'm only going to spend time really taking apart one of them. But the 3 statements would be this. Your professors or the professors or people, even in my own family, we have both of Leslie and I, my wife's in this service, we have professors in our own family. The professors are right. The pastors are right. You are right. There are things in the Bible that really are too good to be true. They are too good to be true. There's stuff in the Bible that's crazy. The dead coming back to life. My goodness, Lazarus was in there long enough, he was stinking. Roll it away, the smell of a rotting body. How did God form it all back together? Jesus, it's amazing. There are things in the Bible, creation. There's stuff in the Bible that is really, truly too good to be true. In a sense, they are right. This book is full of stuff that does not work the way most of our lives work normally. It's not the same. They're right. It is too good to be true. The second thing that I would say is this. It is possible, or I would say this, doubt is a great place for personal ownership to develop. So when you are in seasons of doubt or times of doubt in your life, when you come across things that are difficult, that you can't wrap your mind around in the Bible, I want to be really clear. It is those places of doubt that God can often do some of the most amazing things, and ownership of your faith at a whole new level can happen when you hit seasons of doubt. Doubt is not necessarily a bad thing, and their story or our story is not done. And then the third idea that I want to just hand out here before we jump into the meat of this is rebellion and doubt. Rebellion and doubt are two very different things. In the West, we tend to think that we can't believe in something until we've figured it all out. And if I can't figure it all out, or it's too good to be true in certain ways, then I need to reject it all. And I want to be really clear. You can be in seasons of doubt and still not rebel against Christianity. Rebellion and doubt are not the same thing. They are not the same thing. And it's that third idea about rebellion and doubt not being the same thing that I want to spend the majority of our time on this morning. And let me begin this by asking just a few questions. I'm not going to answer them at the beginning of the message. I'm going to answer them at the end. But I want to ask a few questions thinking about this idea of going through seasons of doubt. The first question would be this: are seasons or places in our life of doubt the same as rejecting Christianity? So when you go through a season in your life, let's say that you are a young adult, and you all of a sudden are wrestling with, what do you do with death that necessarily appears to have taken place before death technically enters the Garden of Eden? What do you do with Age of the Earth? What do you do with dinosaurs? What do you do with all these different things? How do you answer that? And you're still wrestling through it. When you hit those questions and you don't know how to answer them, does it mean that you have to reject Christianity when you hit seasons of doubt or places of confusion? We're going to answer that this morning. The next thing is this: is it possible to believe in something without understanding it? Is it possible? In the West, do we really have to have something totally figured out before we believe in it? Or can you believe in something before you have it all figured out? We're going to answer that this morning too. The third question is this: is it okay to wrestle with your faith? I need to be really clear up front, okay, before we get into this too far. The answer is yes. It is absolutely okay to wrestle with your faith. You are going to go through seasons where you wrestle with your faith. What you believe and why you believe it, it's going to happen. It doesn't mean you have to reject Christianity, but you will go through seasons where you wrestle with what you believe and why you believe it. It is going to happen. It's going to happen. With this in mind, let's jump into the text. We're going to begin this series, When in Doubt, so looking at the people in the Bible that went through seasons of doubt. This includes Thomas. We're going to start with doubting Thomas. We're going to also look at John. Remember John, the guy who Jesus said, there's nobody on earth that's been born that's like this guy. And even in the last days of John's life, he had a message sent to Jesus going, are you the one? So one of the best of all humans went through deep seasons of doubt right at the end of his life. We're going to talk about these people that went through seasons of doubt in the Bible. We're going to begin today with Thomas, old doubting Thomas. John 20, 19 through 29, Hilda did a great job reading the text. I'm going to go back through this again, and we're going to really begin to tear it apart. On the evening of that day, the first day of the week, the doors being locked where the disciples were for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said to them, peace be with you. I want to pause for a moment. You got to get this in your mind, what's happening. This is another one of those too good to be true moments, where any rationalist that only believes the world operates as it operates right now, as they experience it, would look at this text and go, that can't be real. Because here's what's happened. Jesus has died. The movement, the followers, they think it's kind of fallen apart. And then all of a sudden, they're in a locked room because they're afraid for their life. They're afraid the same thing is going to happen to them that happened to Jesus, that they would be crucified and killed. They're literally hiding together, the remaining disciples. Of course, this isn't Judas, and we're still working through what Peter's up to at this. All this stuff is kind of working out, right? And they're gathered together in the room, hanging out, and then like Loki with the Tesseract, poof, he appears in the room with them. That's too good to be true, right? Now listen, I wish that was normal life and I had that kind of control myself. This morning, right now, I would like grab that baby and poof, we'd be on the beach in Hawaii. That would be cool if that was norm, but it's not the norm. This is too good to be true. The Bible is full of that. Let's just admit it. Verse 20, when he had said this, peace be with you, Jesus, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you. And when he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you withhold forgiveness from any, it is withheld. Now Thomas, oh man, see, even when I say the name Thomas, I can't help but smirk a little bit because I know there's a little bit of Thomas in me, and I bet there's a little bit of Thomas in some of you. Now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. Are you one of those guys that like never wins a prize? Nothing ever goes, like all the amazing things happen when you're gone. Everybody else is lucky. You miss all the cool stuff? Yeah. Welcome to the club. Here we go. Thomas was not with them. Okay, so the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless you see his hands, the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe. Okay, so this is the time, if you're watching a movie, when the screen goes totally dark, and a little, like wording comes up and says 1 year later, 5 years later. The little phrase here in verse 26 is 8 days later. So let this sink in. Jesus lets Thomas sit in his doubt. He lets it happen. Can you imagine? Now, this is just speculation by Mike. Can you imagine what was going on in the conversations with Thomas and the rest of the disciples? They're all hanging out together, right? I'm sure they're hanging out together, and the disciples are like, seriously, Thomas, man, he came. And Thomas is like, I'm not believing it. And like, seriously, dude, he was right here. Look, we got the Holy Spirit. He breathed on us. It's pretty cool, right? I mean, smell me. I smell like Jesus' breath. I don't know how that went, but in this, right? I mean, in the middle of all this, it's amazing, right? This crazy story that's over the top, and Thomas is like, won't believe it unless I can understand it, unless I can wrap my mind around it, unless I can touch it, sense it with my own senses, I am out. I won't believe it unless I fully get it, fully understand it, fully experience it the way I want to. I quit, I'm out. Thomas says this, I don't know how many times. This is Mike's speculation in these 8 days distance of God allowing him to sit in his doubt. His disciples were inside again 8 days later, and Thomas was with them. Well, that's good. He's not going to miss out on it this time. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, now, this is kind of cool to me. Like, in my mind, this is not of the Lord. This is Mike just thinking. But in my mind, it's like Jesus, poof, he's there again, right? Then he's hanging out with the disciples. He's like, peace be with you. And then he turns his head and looks at Thomas. Now, it's probably loving and endearing. I just see this in my mind. He looks at Thomas. And he says this, of course, right? Put your finger here and see my hands. And put your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe. And Thomas answered him, this is a really big deal. We're going to come back to this in a little bit. My Lord and my God. Jesus said to him, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and have yet still believed. May God add his blessing to the reading of his word. Let's take this apart a little bit. Notice Thomas's dilemma of doubt. This is important. Thomas's dilemma of doubt occurs at least partially because of his absence from Christian community. Now, I need to be really clear. I mean, a good homiletic, as I'm building a sermon, I have to fill in some of these gaps, right? He very well could have been gone from the disciples for a very good reason. Maybe he was out getting food. Maybe he was visiting family. Maybe he was mad at them. I have no idea. Maybe it was a good reason. Maybe it was a bad reason. I have no idea. But for whatever reason, he was outside of the Christian community when all this went down. Now, I want to pause on that. Even though we don't know the reason why Thomas was away, I think it's very important for us to be aware that in our modern day and age, the tendency to isolate is alive and well. And you can. In fact, post-modern Enlightenment, it's like the modernity idea, even postmodern, modernity and postmodern, and then post the Enlightenment really has breeded this highly individualistic, way in which we do life. And so we really do think that my faith is my own. It's my faith. I got to figure it out. I got to wrestle through it. It's for me. I can go to church to garner some information, but then it is in solitude that I wrestle with what I believe and why I believe it and how I believe it. This is not the way the church was intended to be done. In fact, this is the longest quote of the morning, and the reason I put this up here in its entirety is I want to make sure that you get clearly what I'm saying here. We must combat the post-Enlightenment modern perspective of individuality. Now, I got to be clear here. My dad's, of course, is a college professor. He's taught. He's also been a pastor for years. He's a good historian. So my dad would say, Mike, you need to be clear with people. Not everything out of the Enlightenment was bad, right? There were some really good things that came out of it. But one of the unintended byproducts in modernity, post-Enlightenment modernity, is this highly individualistic, it's all about me. That mentality is a byproduct of this. One of the prime things taught in the Bible is the necessity of participating in Christian community. And this stands in contrast to our natural proclivity to want to be alone. All by myself, I do this on my own, it's just me. Keep going. Hebrews 10:24-25 says, let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. So much of the Bible is written to community. This is how you interact with each other. Not giving up and meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day approaching. Keep going. Christianity is about community. We are to confess to each other, James 5:16. Hold each other accountable, Proverbs 27:6. Even these two, I just want to pause on these for a moment. In our modern day and age, especially in the West, we have abandoned confession. What we want to do, and this is true especially in holiness movements, is we want to look sanctified. The early church was massive with confession, so they would share each other's struggles and burdens openly with each other and get help for it. It is so important that the church re-embraces confession. Let me tell you why. I turn 40 in a couple of weeks. Baby, we're almost 40. You look 19. 40's coming fast for me, right? I've been doing ministry now for, I'm getting closer to 20 years of doing this. I started even before I was finishing my degree, working on it all, right? In all my years of ministry, confession is so unbelievably powerful. That's my wife, by the way, if I didn't make that clear. I'm not just calling any girl baby, right? That's definitely my wife. When I sit in my office, and for example, this is a number of years ago before I even moved here, and a gentleman sits down, I'm going to use porn as an example, and he sits down, it's a long-term, passionate attender of the church, and he says, Pastor Mike, I am highly addicted to porn, and I can't break out of this. And all of a sudden, with confession, with this guy that's been wrestling with it internally on his own for so many years, when he confesses it and he's willing to say, get me help, and we get counseling and we begin to work through it, and the bonds of that awful addiction break, there is massive freedom that comes from confession. Or what about marriages, man? I mean, how many times have I sat in my office with people that are going through really hard seasons in marriage? And how often I wish they would have began the confession process of it being difficult years before they come and see me. Usually by the time they come and see me, it's almost always, it's broken, help me pick up the pieces kind of statements. How often I wish they would have come to me long ago and said, hey, marriage is hard and we're not doing it very good. Help us get help. And we could see things, at least begin to work on them and restore them before they always have to fall apart. We desperately need confession back in the church for the sake of our own freedom and health and souls. Confess to one another. But not just that, we need to hold each other accountable, Proverbs 27:6. So when we are not acting or honoring God rightly, or gossip is taking place and somebody goes, listen, that's not right, you shouldn't do that. In our modern church, when something gets out about us, or somebody holds us accountable, you know what we do in the modern church? We leave that church and go to a different one. Because we don't want anybody to know our business, and we don't want anybody to hold us accountable. That's not the way God intended it. God built the church for the community of believers to help each other mature. The maturation of believers happens in community. Christianity is about community. We are to confess to each other, James 5:16. Hold each other accountable, Proverbs 27:6. Meet the needs of each other, Acts 2:44 through 45. And keep each other focused on a glorious destiny, Acts 2:42 through 47 and Hebrews 10:24 through 25. Next slide. Community is where godly charitable love is practiced, developed, received, and offered. We were not meant to do Christianity alone. It's supposed to be worked out in community. It's built that way. I also want to pause, and I want us to become aware of this thought in looking at James 20:19 through 29. Biblical peace isn't actually a knowing it all. Like, I know it all, I've got it all figured out. I'm at peace with God because I know it all. I'm at peace with God because I've figured it all out. That's not how it works. It is a trusting, not a knowing it all. It is a choice to trust. Let me give you some things that I don't understand. Okay, so I got to give you even more clarity to this. Those that know me and know my story, I really did grow up in an amazing home with great parents. My parents are very intelligent. You know, the lowest educated person in our family has a master's. I think I'm the lowest education person in my family. I got to get more degrees, honey. I mean, kids too, like children and parents. So everybody in my family has been to grad school. Everybody in my family has studied. My parents have been professors at a university level, pastored. And I grew up attending church attached to our two largest universities. So IW and OW, it was BWC back then, but Oklahoma Wesleyan University and Indiana Wesleyan University. I grew up on those campuses. I had Sunday school teachers that had PhDs. It's just how I grew up. And even immersed in all of this Christian knowledge from a young age, being taught philosophy and ethics and morality and metaphysics and how the mind works, and years of growing up in this environment, there are things I don't understand at all. Let me give you a short list. These are some of my biblical ones. I have stuff outside of the Bible even too, but let me give you some of the biblical short lists. I don't know what to do with the story of Joshua. The way it reads, Joshua is sent to go in and like genocide, wipe out every child. Non-soldiers, everybody dies. Everything dies. I don't get that. And when I sit in a class or I go to a conference or it's a debate over Christianity and they're like the God of the Old Testament and Joshua, how does that work in light of, I'm right there going, I don't understand that either. I get when I talk to other people, even my own parents, that there are literary styles of the Old Testament. You have prophetic literature, you have all this poetic literature. Maybe it's not exactly as we understand it. We are thousands of years our society dismissed from that. So I'm sure there's tons of things that we don't understand that don't make sense to us, but I just need to be really clear. I don't know what to do with that. And it is really hard. Here's another one. Why in the world did God choose dying on a cross to be the means in which we're no longer held accountable for sin, right? Like the atonement. Why a cross? Why a torture device? That seems like a really painful, arbitrary thing to pick. Like, we're going to go with that one. If I was one of the Elohim, which, praise God, I'm not, so like one of the non-corporeal sentient beings up there hanging out with God, whether it's angelus, angel, or whatever it might be, and they're like, hey, how do we want to redeem humanity? I would have been like, I'm going to vote for a soft, bed with feathers and the pillow, and so I can go down there and lay down. That's how humanity should be redeemed. It's like the most painful, hard. Why was that picked? Why is it blood? Why can't it be another set of laws or another understanding or good? But it's blood. It's literally sacrificial blood. And it's kind of weird. Bleeding things out to forgive another. Like, how does that work? I don't understand it all. That is confusing. It is deep. And then I think about, what do I do with things that died before the fall? What do you do with like dinosaurs? Because the way the Bible reads, it sounds like there was no death before Adam and Eve bit from the apple or whatever it was that they ate from. That sound effect, that was for free. And what do you do with things like a T-Rex? It's all teeth and short arms. So what was he doing before the fall of man? Give me that apple. How does that work? I mean, there's so many things. I have lots of questions about how things could or would have operated. And in my mind, I don't have answers for all that. But I have even more questions even outside of biblical things. There are just as many problems with our modern world. Even in modern sciences, there are issues. What do we do with this? When I was in high school, I did non-Christian education in high school and exercise science. And then, of course, for philosophy and then seminary, I did Christian education. But when I was going to high school, I remember sitting in a class, and they were talking to me like the Big Bang, right? How does the Big Bang work? And my teacher held up a pen, and he pointed to the very top of the pen, and he goes, everything in the universe, every planet, all material, the mass of everything that exists, everything that's in every star, every solar system, all the information for every human, or like how DNA works, not necessarily every individual human, but how that would all come to be. All of that, even the cosmological constants, like gravity, that came out perfectly. Everything that we know, all mass, all energy, all information, everything, we think came from something the size of the head of this pen. And then bang, it came into being. And I remember sitting there going, wow. What kind of machine makes those? And if, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, what has enough power to put all that in there and enough power to start it all? What do you do with that? And the difficulty is, like even with the scientific method, you're supposed to be able to repeat things. How do you repeat that? I'm telling you, we're not watching big bangs happen everywhere. We're not sitting in labs going, poof, there's another universe. That's pretty cool. Poof, there's another one. Like, it happened once. There seems to be evidence for it, and we believe it to be true in this theory, and we're all in for it. What do you do with that? I mean, in my mind, I wrestle through that. Even outside of Christianity, I wrestle with that idea. I got more of them. I got more of them that I actually have time to share with you. But what do we do with the knowledge of what is real or true? I mean, I grew up being taught that the scientific method was the means in which, some of you may know this, the reason I did exercise science, I actually thought about becoming a medical doctor before God called me into ministry. So I was kind of studying down that road. And when I was in school, I remember thinking about this, right? Like, how do we know what is true and good? I was always taught the scientific method. Well, in the latter years, I hang around with some nerdy guys. I love really intellectual debate. So there's a couple of, there's a college professor and a few other people that I hang around with on a regular basis. We just debate modern stuff because it's so fun for me. I know everybody else hates it. It's fun for me. And we were talking about the quantum sciences, like quantum entanglement, all this new stuff. Did you know, just Google it, the scientific method doesn't work for the latest discoveries in science. It doesn't work anymore. There are things that just don't line up. I mean, literally the question of what is true, we don't even have a tool to figure it out anymore outside of Christianity or the Bible completely. We have no tool to even figure out what is truly true because the quantum sciences are so nuts. So the basic question of what is true, how do we wrestle through that? I mean, I could go on and on and on and on, but here's the statement I want to make, whether you're coming from Christianity or you're coming from a secular perspective, you're coming from a truly humanistic, personal, individualistic, whatever perspective you're coming from, I want to ask this one question. Where do you lean when you are in doubt? Where do you lean when you're in doubt? Your own experiences? Senses? What you can know, what you can understand? Where do you lean when you are in doubt? I want to say it like this. It is absolutely possible to have seasons of doubt and things you don't understand and still not reject Christ. Biblical faith is a choosing of where you will place your trust. Christianity is not about an understanding of everything. It is about a choosing of where you will place your trust. Okay, so I want to go back to Thomas, and I want to spend a few minutes there, and then we're going to bring this to a close. I want to start with that idea. God allows Thomas to sit in his doubt. He allows it to happen. It's important that I say this. The purpose of the book of John, the whole book, was that people would believe. The whole purpose of the book was that people would believe. And it ends with people wrestling. Wrestling is okay. The purpose of the book of John is that people would believe, and it ends with people wrestling. I was meeting with my worship arts team. I also write sermons in community because I think that the collective knowledge of the group is often better than the singular individual. So I do get away and pin together the final thoughts of a sermon for sure, but I make sure to always wrestle my sermon ideas out with really other guys that are smarter than me, more intelligent than me, great thinkers. I was sharing the basic ideas from this sermon with the worship arts team, and Alyssa Teller, one of our staff members, made a great insight that I actually forgotten about. And she said this isn't a direct quote, but this is the idea. God even named his people in the Bible Israel. Now, if you've been to seminary, you'll know the significance of this. It's going to click. I'll share it with you if you haven't. The name Israel is really significant. Israel, the name Israel literally means to wrestle or struggle with God. He named the origin of all of us, the billions of people that meet together and worship him. He named the origin of us, the people that wrestle or struggle with God. So when people go, is it okay to go through seasons of doubt or seasons where you wrestle or seasons where you're trying to figure out, I want to tell you, yes. God allows it. He allows individuals to go through it. Just because you have seasons of doubt doesn't mean you need to reject it. It is always, the whole system is drawing us to a place where we have to choose where we are going to lean when we are in our seasons of doubt. What are you going to choose to trust in when you are in seasons of doubt? I'm going to invite Josh up and we're going to be done in a few minutes. I want to go back to our original questions, the first 3 questions that we asked. I want to walk through these one at a time and then we will be finished in just a few minutes. And I get that I'm a little long today. First question, are seasons or places of doubt the same as rejecting Christianity? The answer is no, absolutely not. Rejecting Jesus is not the same as having seasons of doubt or places that don't make sense. Faith is about where you lean when it doesn't make sense. So when a college student comes to me and says, Pastor Mike, my flannel board, they don't say it like this is my interpretation, my 3rd grade flannel board version of Christianity has holes in it. My Sunday school teacher was amazing, but she was a really busy mom, and I'm finding out that the things that she taught me in Sunday school, it wasn't quite complete, and it's got some holes in it. And I don't think I'm a Christian anymore. My response is, whoa, why do those two have to go together? Is it possible that she didn't understand it completely right, and that there are some really hard things, and that it doesn't mean you have to reject absolutely everything? You can have seasons of doubt and absolutely still be a Christian. In fact, let me say it like this. Did you know, it's just important to say this out loud. Did you know that we're all going to get to heaven and be wrong about some stuff? Right? We're going to get to heaven, and in your mind, you've maybe worked out how the Trinity works, or what do we do with death before the Garden of Eden, or whatever it might be. You're going to get to heaven, you're going to think you have it worked out, and you're going to discover you didn't quite know everything. God allowed Thomas to sit in his doubt. The second question is this: is it possible to believe in something without understanding it? Is it possible to believe in something without understanding it? The answer is yes. There is so much that we don't know, and we put our faith in things every day. It's simple things like flying in a plane. You may not understand all of how it works, and you put the very safety of your life in it when you hop on that bad boy. To very complex things like love. And when I stand on the stage, I've married, I don't even know how many people over the years now. You stand there, and do you take to be your wife, to have to hold? And then they repeat the vows back and forth. There's so much risk, so much trust, and for many people, so much fear. There's so much we don't know, even from a scientific perspective, apart from emotions. How many planets are out there? We don't even know. Every time we get deeper pictures of space, we just find that it's way bigger than we thought, over and over and over again. How does the quantum world work? We don't even know what's true anymore. Like trying to figure out what is reliable and consistent and like expected. How many planets are out there? I want to ask that question again in light of this question. Is there life on them? With all those planets, the possible ones that are maybe in the Goldilocks zone, right distance from a right sun at a right age, how many of them out there might have life? We don't know. There's so much we don't know. We don't even know everything that's in our very own ocean on our one planet, let alone what's out there all across the vast space of the universe. And yet we make statements like, there is none of this, or there is all of this, or there is, how do we even know? We should never use a superlative phrase again. We don't know. And so it absolutely must be possible to walk trusting that things are going to work without understanding how they all work. It has to happen that way. The third idea would be this. Is it okay to wrestle with your faith? Is it okay to wrestle with your faith? A resounding, absolutely 100% clear yes. Okay, boy, you got to really engage with me. I'm going to take you down a trail of logic for just a moment. It's very possible one of my parents might watch this and correct me on this in the next couple of days. But I'm going to do my best, right? I'm going to walk you down this trail of logic. Bear with me for just a moment. You can trust in something and someone and not understand everything about them. It has to happen. We do it every day. In fact, that will happen if God is real. Okay, here we go. Hang on. You got to think with me. If there is a God, he must be superior to us, right? So if there is a God, he must be superior to us. If he is infinitely superior to us, we can't understand him. Why? Because if you could understand God, if we were up at his level, he wouldn't be a God. Therefore, if God is real, you will be required to have places where your only option is trust. Listen, God built the system where trust is required. He made it that way. And if you think that you can only believe in things that you have figured out, you can't walk in faith. I want to go back to two statements that were made. Thomas, but even before Thomas, I want to look at Mary. Easter morning, Mary makes her way through the garden, assuming she has lost everything. She comes to the grave. In my mind, I can see this. I talked about it at Easter. The stone is rolled away. She goes there to mourn, to weep the loss of it all. God allows that to happen. He allows that to happen. He allows that to happen. And then in a whisper, he says to her, Mary. And at first, it's too good to be true because so much of the stuff in here is too good to be true. And at first, it's too good to be true. And so she talks with him a little bit. And then he just stops again and he just says one more time, Mary. And all of a sudden it clicks in her mind and it begins to make sense. And she responds not by saying, oh, I got it figured out. Now the atonement makes total sense to me. Now I get why you died. Now I get death. Now I get resurrection. I figured it all out. I'm in now. That's not what she says. She responds by saying, in Aramaic, she says the word Rabboni. That literally, like rabbi, teacher. She says to him, I follow you. I trust in you. Another way to say it in our modern day and age might be, in all of my doubts and all I don't understand, I lean in and choose to trust Christ. Oh, but it happens again. See, Thomas. When Thomas meets with him and says, I'm out, I don't believe unless I can figure it out, unless I can touch his side, put my hands in his side, unless I can figure all of this out and wrestle it all down, then I will choose to believe. And when God finally shows up and they interact, he says, Lord and my God. The statement, so his first statement was one of, I am superior and I've got to figure it all out. And once I do it all, touch it, figure it out, my own experiences, then I'll believe in it. But his statement he makes to God is not one of superiority or figured out. The statement he makes to God is one of submission. See, what changed in him, this is so important, what changed in him is not that he understood how all of this worked. What changed in him is the posture of his heart. He went from I solve it all to I choose to trust. Listen, the real question that all of us have to wrestle with is simply this. Everyone will trust in something. What will you choose to trust in? That's it. That's the question. Because this is full of stuff that's too good to be true. And man, I want a God that is so much bigger than this finite world that is locked into entropic decay and coming to an end. I want a God and I want a heaven that is always being made deeper. I love the way Lewis says it, further up and further in. I want to follow a God where my greatest adventures are still in front of me. I want something bigger in life. Blaise Pascal is right. There is a hunger in my heart for something that is too good to be true. And because he is God and because I am finite, the necessity of faith must be a place. And so when I read through the Bible and I discover those places where I don't understand it and it doesn't make sense, I cast my lot. I choose to trust. I lean into Christ. Where do you lean when you are in seasons of doubt? Oh, my friends, you can absolutely have doubts and not walk in rebellion. I want you to grab the next steps card. They're in the back of the chair in front of you. Thank you for hanging with me. I know it was a little long today. Grab the next steps card. Pull it out. Everybody get the next steps cards out. You can't just listen to a sermon. You have to ask the question, Lord, what do you want me to do from this? Do not. I am not here to entertain you. I am not here to entertain you. I want you to grow in your faith. And I just want you to wrestle through this, right? First of all, maybe somebody out there, you need to choose to lean into God. For so long, you have thought in your mind, I'm not going to be Christian, I'm not going to believe it until I have it figured out. And maybe today is the day you go, listen, if that's what I'm choosing, I will never be Christian because I am finite and I will never have everything figured out. I choose faith. It's built that way. I am sorry, there is no other option. It is built around faith. He made everything will go that direction. For others out there, maybe you have a friend, a loved one that is in that spot. Like they won't be followers of Jesus. They won't lean into Christ until they have everything solved. And you've been praying for so long that God would give them all the answers they need. And really what you need to be praying for is that God would change the posture of their heart. We will pray for that person too. Maybe write that name down. Pray for, and you fill it out. Pray for. We'll pray with you. We want to pray with you. Pray for that person. Maybe for you right now, you just need to embrace the peace of knowing that you do not have to have this all solved to be a trusting follower of Jesus. Let that peace wash over you. If you have any other prayer requests, write them down. Anything else that God puts on your heart, share it with Him. Use the next few moments to reflect and grow. Go.
We just want to thank you so much for joining us online. If God's working in your heart, we would love to hear from you. Go to www.encountertrinity.com and make sure to look up our information and send us a message. We want to know what God's doing in your heart. We want you to know that you are loved by God and absolutely have a purpose.